ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन् इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So this chapter is entitled as the movements of the living entities. How the living entity passes away from this material body at the time of death was described in the last chapter. The attached householder who spent his days by hook or crook earning his livelihood, maintaining his family, and who never bothered about spiritual development of life, was described that he meets with a terrible end in his life. And because of the varieties of sinful activities he performed, the Yamadutas, they take the soul outside the body and he is dragged to the hellish planets of life to suffer the varieties of sinful activities, reactions which he had performed in his lifetime. And then Lord Kapila explained that when he thus becomes free from his sinful reactions after undergoing varieties of punishments, then once again he is given a chance to be born in the same form of life. So we undergo varieties of punishments and then varieties of birth in the lower species of life, and then once again we are given a chance in the human form of life, so that in this human form of life we can make a solution to this consistent problem of repeated birth and death. So this is how it was explained in the last chapter. So how exactly the living entity is born once again and given a chance in the human life was explained in the previous few verses. So that famous verse which Prabhupada quotes many times, Karmana devanetrena jantur deha upapadyate. Under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, Devanetrena, and according to his karmana, Jantur Deha Upapadyate. The living entity is assigned a particular type of body. And how it is assigned, how the living entity goes into that body. Striyaha pravishtha udaram. The living entity enters into the womb of the mother. If he has to take birth, he has to enter into the womb of mother. How he enters into the womb of the mother? Pumso retaha kanashrayaha. The living entity ashrayaha takes shelter of semen of father, and through the semen of father he is injected into the womb of mother. So now Lord Kapila starts describing how he takes birth. Because sometimes we may wonder that when I was born, my parents distributed lot of sweets, isn't it? Of course, to take birth in human form of life is very, very auspicious, very rare. There is no doubt about it. It should be celebrated. But actually, we do not understand that Bhagavad Gita explains birth is also a misery. Birth is also a misery. In 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains there are many items of knowledge. You will be surprised to understand this is considered to be an item of knowledge. To perceive Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. When one starts understanding that birth, Janma, Mrityu, death, Jara, old age, Vyadhi, disease, Dukkha, Dosha, these are actually dosha, these are faults. These do not belong to me, but I have to undergo. So that is why they are called as dosha. So, dukkha, dosha, anudarshanam. When one starts understanding that these are the miseries, real miseries of life, then he is considered to be in knowledge. And later Krishna says, apart from these 21 items which I have described, beginning with humility, taking shelter of spiritual master, these are all items of knowledge, including to see birth, old age, disease and death as miseries. Krishna says, apart from this, everything else is ignorance. So what we are pursuing in modern life is nothing but ignorance. So in that sense, it is very important to understand how birth is a misery. So Lord Kapila in these texts is going to describe how miserable it is to take birth. What is the condition of the living entity when he was in the womb of the mother? Now we are outside, we are going around happily, freely, we are moving around. Just imagine, even sometimes during Corona, I remember, few days, when it was lockdown and the movement of people were restricted, at least for a month, people were not allowed to go out of certain area. You can imagine what was the condition of people. And once the lockdown was opened, you can see what was the condition of the people. Imagine it was not that you were, in one cubicle, one small cubicle, you were restricted. You could not move your hands, you could not move your leg. You could go out to certain area. But even that, that we cannot go out of certain area, even that itself was so horrible experience. People were locked up in their houses and could not move out, isn't it? So you can just imagine, the living entity is conscious at 7 months. Up to 7 months, he is not conscious of pains and pleasures. But in the womb of the mother, at 7 months, he becomes conscious of pain and pleasure. What the mother is eating, the child can feel in the womb. If the mother is eating something which is very salty, which is very, let us say, pungent, the tender skin of the child cannot tolerate that pain. And the child suffers that pain in the womb of the mother. Sometimes when there is a harsh noise outside, let us say if there is a bomb blast, the child becomes afraid in the womb of the mother, hearing that sound. So the child is conscious of pains and pleasure. So what miseries he has to undergo in a small sack of the mother's womb. The child is packed where hardly he can move his hands and legs. Hardly he can move. And he starts kicking in the womb of the mother, trying to move from here and there. And what are the circumstances one is put in is described here by Lord Kapila. So, and it is very scientifically described. Today, in the modern science, with some kind of machinery like ultrasonic and other things, now they are able to see how the child, he is in the womb. Earlier these machines were not available. But still we find complete description of how and when the different parts of the body evolve in the womb of the mother. Very nicely it is described in Bhagavatam and more elaborately in Markandeya Purana. Prabhupada is quoting. So these Mayavadis who try to belittle the position of Puranas, they do not understand that actually they are called as Pancham Veda. Even though there are 4 Vedas, the Puranas, the histories, Itihasas, they are called as Pancham Veda. That is why Rupa Goswami explains this very nicely. He says, Shruti Smriti Puran Adi Panch Ratri ki vidhim vina Ekantika Hare Bhakti Utpateva Kalpate. Anybody who is practicing spiritual life without reference to Shruti, Smriti, Puran Adi, Puranas, Itihasas, Samhitas, all those things, is actually practicing spiritual life only in hallucination. He is only creating a disturbance in the society. So, we can see the truth that how whatever is described in Markandeya Puran is corroborated by modern scientific advancement of knowledge. So, we saw Lord Kapila describing that through the semen of the father, the living entity is injected into the womb of the mother. And then how the child starts developing, that also we saw. On the first night, the sperm and ovum mix together. 5th night, mixture, it ferments into a bubble. On the 10th night, it develops into a plum, like a small fruit. And then gradually it becomes into an embryo, lump of flesh, or andam, mamsam or andam. And then later in the 3rd, which we were reading today, it is described in the course of a month. So earlier it was only days. Days were passing around by 10 days, and just before a month, the flesh, the embryo in a small plum-like shape is developed. Now it will start showing the signs of further development. Just like we find you sow a seed in the earth, it is not divided. Practically you cannot make out anything in that seed. But slowly when the when it becomes fertilized and the seed starts growing, then you start seeing small bud comes out of it. Still you cannot make out what plant it is, whether it is apple tree, it is banana tree, or what it is. It's just a very small thing in the form of a small bud. And then later, slowly when it starts developing, then you can see there are leaves coming out, there are flowers coming out, there are fruits coming out. Isn't it? Similarly, even this whole universe, this is how it develops. From seed form and then further development happens. So we know this whole universe, in the beginning, it is in the form of Mahat Tattva. Whole this creation is in the form of Mahat Tattva, in which there is no division. You cannot make out anything. It is just uniform Mahat Tattva. But then, by the glance of the Lord, when it is agitated, then there is division in that. So then we find Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, Tamo Guna, they are formed. And then by the combination of Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, Tamo Guna, further development happens. Panchabhuta, mind, intelligence, ego, all these material elements comes out. So whatever happens in the mother's womb actually happens in the universe also. Happens in the universe. How this body is created, practically in the same way this universe is also created. So, here it is described, then in a course of a month, first head is formed. 2 months, hand, feet and others limb, they start forming. So that means first Karmendriya, they are developed first. Hands, feet, legs, all these starts coming. Later Jnanendriya starts manifesting. Karmendriya are more gross, Jnanendriya are more subtle. So this we see. By the end of 3 months, nails, finger, toes, hairs, bones, skin. So within 3 months, all these starts appearing. As do the organs of generation and then chidras. So this is what we were recently reading in the story of, I was telling about the story of Puranjana, right? That Puranjana story describes this human body as a body of 9 gates. Body of 9 gates. So now you can see how these gates develop. Later on we start residing in this body and start enjoying this body. How exactly this body, how this city is developed. Just like we can see when the governments, now they have announced, near Agra, they are going to develop a huge city like Noida. So, many acres of hundreds and thousands of acres of land is being taken, and now slowly they want to make development there. Now what will happen? All real estate people, they will start buying properties there, and then the city will start developing. Later on the citizens will start coming. First all arrangements are made, and then slowly people start coming when they see there are facilities in the city available. So Lord Kapila is describing how this city of Puranjana is formed. And specifically, this city is called the city of 9 gates. It is not called the city of hands, legs, all those things, because hands, legs are available even for animals also. It is not so great. But these gates of the body, they are considered to be very important. So the 2 of the gates is these 2 eyes, through which one gains knowledge about the form in this material world. Another two are the two ears. These are the other two gates. So 2 plus 2, 4. Through the ears, one gains knowledge about sound in this material world. Then we have a mouth, through which one gains the knowledge of taste of the food. The tongue is given by which one tastes, whether it is bitter, whether it is sweet, isn't it? And then we have 2 nostrils to smell. Then we have the male generating organ, and we have the rectum. It is said one should internally and externally keep these gates always pure. Internally, by practicing spiritual life, just like we say that mantra which we chant, Om apavitro pavitro va sarvavastham gato biva yasmaret pundarikaksham sabahya abhyantara shuchi. One can become purified inside. All his gates can be pure inside by remembering the Supreme Lord, by practicing spiritual life. And externally, one should keep them clean by taking bath, whatever is required, whatever the different niyamas are given, that as soon as one gets up, one should clear his stomach, one should take bath, like that. So different rules and regulations are mentioned how one should keep them pure. In the same chapter, later on, Narada Muni describes about at the old age how these 9 gates, they are plundered by the agents of time. Very nicely he describes. In the beginning we are seeing how these different organs are formed so that we can enjoy. If we do not make use of them properly, the same 9 gates will be plundered by thieves and rogues. They are the different soldiers of time. They will plunder these. How one enters into a city is through the gates, isn't it? How one enters into a city through the different gates, through the different roads leading to that city. So these 9 gates, if we do not utilize them properly in human form of life, at the point of death they will be rendered useless completely. So Prabhupada explains that very nicely, how they are rendered useless at the point of death, these 9 gates. So he explains, they are harassed by old age, diseases in these different gates. All these different diseases enter through these gates. How? The eyes, they become very dim in old age. With these eyes, which we are so proud about, slowly cataract will develop. We cannot see properly, isn't it? With these eyes we enjoy a lot of forms in this material world, not understanding that the point will come where no more I can enjoy. So better to utilize these eyes properly, rather than thinking, let me enjoy till my death, because you cannot enjoy after some time. We will become very disillusioned. When we are young, when we are energetic, if we do not utilize our senses properly, at the point of death, when all these senses will lose their capacity to enjoy, then we will repent that nothing did I achieve in my life. I did not utilize them properly, isn't it? So eyes will become very dim. Now is the time you can read Vedic literature nicely. One should be thinking that I am so fortunate. I can read Bhagavad Gita, I can read Bhagavatam. And in spite of giving, the Lord has given me eyes, and if I do not utilize them properly, if I do not go to the temple of the Lord and have darshan of the beautiful deities of the Lord, then Bhagavatam explains my eyes are as good as the eyes on the peacock feather. They are also very beautiful eyes, but what is the use of that? Isn't it? So, what is a great deal? People who do not have eyes, they are blind. I have eyes, and I do not utilize my eyes properly for the reason, then there is no use. Because finally, the power of these eyes will go away at the point of death. They will become dim. We will not be able to read. We will require glasses. Isn't it? Then, nose, the other two gates, they will be filled with mucus. And Prabhupada explains at the point of death, ghar ghar sound will come. Wherein, because one cannot breathe properly, he has to take some time, oxygen is connected, and then through that machine only he will be able to breathe. Otherwise it will be very difficult. You see? Then, Prabhupada says that sometimes one has to sniff ammonia in order to clear the blockage. You will find old people carrying, some kind of bottle in order to clear their nostrils now and then. Then the ears become hard of hearing. Especially old age people make a lot of fun. Are buddhe sunta nahi hai kya tere ko? Isn't it? People make a lot of fun. You will find that especially. They will speak loudly, knowingly they will speak more loudly because they know he cannot hear anything. So, hard of hearing, he requires an aid to hear. So now we have time, we can hear Krishna Katha rather than putting all garbage inside our ears with so much of material this thing. Our already consciousness is filled with garbage, and then you utilize your ear to fill more garbage inside. Isn't it? We are losing our important human form of life. Then mouth becomes too weak. You require fake teeth even to give some good look to you. Then sometimes, somebody was saying that our engineer who has become quite old, he has no teeth. So better he should go to dentist and, at least look-wise he will. And they cannot chew food also. They will have to gulp it. Just like when a small child does not have teeth, similarly we become practically like that in the old age also. We lose our teeth, isn't it? And rectum, sometimes, most of the times, you will find very difficult for them to clear, or they clear very often when in a child form they were put with huggies. When he becomes too old on the bed, he cannot go out. Again, huggies have to be put. Because without his knowledge, sometimes the stool passes or sometimes does not pass. Enema is required to be given and then stool is taken out. Similarly, some medicines are required to accelerate urinating. These are all symptoms of old age. We should understand. All these chidras which Lord Kapila is describing, they are appearing, isn't it? Actually, they're all, this material body itself is a source of misery, is what one has to understand. Isn't it? That is why Vedic literature, Bhagavatam says that Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke. One who thinks himself bag of these three elements, kapha, pitta, vayu. Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke. Swadhi kalatradishu bhomejjati. And one who thinks not only that I am this body, bag of body, anything related to this bag of body, kalatra, this is my wife, this is my children, all these things. Anything, my house, related to this body, he thinks that is mine. Swadhi kalatradishu bhomejjati. And having a mentality that because this body has taken birth in this land, this is worshipable land. Today I am worshipping Bharat Mata ki Jai, and tomorrow if I am born in Pakistan, then I will say Pakistan ki Jai. So what is it? Great deal about where I take birth, where this body takes birth, isn't it? So, bhaumai jyati, yat tirtha buddhi salile na karihi chit. One who goes to the place of pilgrimage only to take bath and not to associate with great devotees and learn spiritual science. Sa eva gokharaha janeshu abhigneshu sa eva gokharaha. He is as good as animal, like ass or a cow. Nothing better than that. So, we have to understand that. Finally, Narada describes that how this body, the soul is dragged out of this body. At the point of death, the soul will be dragged out by Yamadutas if he is sinful. And then, he does not want to leave. Nobody wants to leave this body. Because staying in this body for a long time, you become attached. Imagine what is the meaning of attachment. You start living under one tree, after some time you will become attached to that place itself. And imagine you are living in a nice house, nice bungalow. How much attachment? And living in this body for 60, 70 years, how much more attached we become to this body. And Prabhupada says, you may be living in a most horrible condition, still you are attached. You can try, you can tell Mr. Pig, sir, you are living in a very dirty place. You are living in a very horrible body. You are eating stool. Why don't you come out of this body? Can I cut your throat? I'll give you a better body. No, it will not. Even a pig will shout and cry if you try to kill it. If you try to tell him that you come out of this body. Prabhupada gives an example. You take a worm out of stool. You keep it away. After some time it will walk back to the stool. It has become attached to that environment. This is how we are all made. We are made to practice, to become conditioned to certain environment. That we do not understand. So we have become conditioned to birth, old age, disease, death. We are thinking this is natural. Actually, these are not natural. We have become conditioned like this. Otherwise, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of death? If it was natural, why I should be afraid of death? Anyway, it is natural. It is unnatural to us. That is why we are afraid. Why we do not want to be diseased? Because they do not belong to me. Isn't it? So this has to be understood. So there he explains, when the soul is being taken out, prana also goes with the soul. Along with the prana, subtle body also goes with the soul. And subtle body is the one where all our impressions are stored of this body, whatever we have done. Those desires at the point of death, just like it is given about Puranjan, that even at the point of death, he never remembered his most intimate friend, the super soul, who is always staying with him 24 hours. He was remembering his wife. What will happen to my wife? Who will take care of my wife? My children, my wife, they are all like ship which is wrecked, which has no one to take care of it. It is in the midst of the ocean. He is thinking like this. And he is still not remembering the super soul, the Supreme Lord, who is considered to be Suhrad, the real friend of the living entity. This is the condition of the living entity. Imagine. Isn't it? So he is dragged out of this body. His whatever consciousness, whatever impressions are stored in that subtle body, that subtle body will take the living entity now to the new body. And very scientific, very scientific. You can imagine, just like if any of you have a desire to go to America, isn't it? First the desire manifests in your mind, in your subtle body. Then you start working. Then without telling, You will start seeking a job online. कहाँ पे मिलेगा काम, अमेरिका में मिलेगा क्या कुछ. Maybe in some other temple I'll get some pujari requirement maybe there, isn't it? And then you will apply for them. Can you get me one visa? Send me a letter. I will tell my president, Prabhu, please, financial problems are there. Can you sign one letter? Isn't it? Then desires are there. You want to go. The Lord will sanction, satisfy. And then physical body will be carried by your subtle body. See how this happens? Subtle body carries your physical body. Same thing happens at the point of death. Whatever remnant desires you are still having, that kind of body you are going to get next. You see? So this is very nicely being described, and we can see here how Lord Kapila is describing, and he is saying that the living entity is completely packed in that womb, surrounded by mother's stool, urine, mutra, mala. He is surrounded by all that, which is a fermenting ground for all kinds of worms. And very soon we will find in the next shlokas, Lord Kapila will describe his delicate skin will be bitten by these worms, and he feels pain at that time. And then pungent food mother is eating, he will feel pain. So Prabhupada is saying that is why our Vedic culture was so nice. That okay, these problems maybe they are somehow or other, I have ended up in this material body. Now to make the best use of the bad bargain. This body is a bad bargain. But the good thing is, it's a human body. We can still utilize it properly. So, Prabhupada is explaining, according to the Vedic scriptures, even before the birth of a child, Garbhadana samskara was compulsory for higher society. So that, even though if a child is born, let the child be born who will utilize this human form of life to get out of the cycle of birth and death. Not one like Asura who will come into this life and only create hellish life for himself and for others. Isn't it? What is that called in Bhagavad Gita? Varana Shankara. Isn't it? So, all these rules and regulations are given. This is given, how the child, so Vedic literatures describe, these Puranas describe what mother should eat, what she should not eat, isn't it? So, all these things, one can make use of them, and when the child is born, he can be from beginning slowly engaged in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, is a science which can make a crude man into a gentleman. So we'll stop with this. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.